This episode, we're going to talk again about some taxi stories in Hong Kong. Joanne is one of the few female taxi drivers in Hong Kong. To make a living, she works a day job and then drives a taxi at night. It's really tough. Joanne hasn't had much luck since she was young. Her family wasn't rich. She didn't do well in school. And after entering the working world, she always ran into bad bosses and difficult co-workers. She had been in a few relationships, but they all ended quietly, like it just wasn't meant to be. People often said she was just a little bit off in everything, not a bad person, but never quite good enough. After she lost her job, she spent her days lying around at home. She saw her friends driving for Uber or delivering food. Their lives weren't amazing, but at least they had freedom. So she thought, why not try driving a taxi? She could drive herself, choose her own hours, and wouldn't have to deal with anyone's bad attitude. But when she really started studying for the taxi license, she realized it wasn't as easy as she imagined. She failed the written test, then failed the road test a few times. Once she almost hit a lamp post. The examiner said she wasn't careful enough when turning. She had to take the test 5 times before finally passing. Every time she failed, she just kept practicing, signing up again, and trying harder. She never gave up. On the day she finally got her license, she cried. That license meant she could finally walk her own path. Even though she had only been driving a taxi for 1 year, and was still considered a newbie, the struggles she had faced were no less than anyone else's. One night, she got an order to pick up someone in a rural area of Hong Kong, then drive them back to the city. It was a small village. Not many people lived there, so the road was very dark. There weren't many streetlights, and part of the road had no lights at all. Just as she entered the village, she suddenly heard a heavy thump. It was clear the car had hit something. It was so dark that she thought maybe she ran over a big rock or something. She immediately got out of the car and walked around to check. But after checking around the vehicle, she found no signs of impact, no dents, no animal remains, nothing. So she didn't think too much about it, got back in the car, and continued toward the pickup spot. When she arrived at the house, Joanne waited a long time, but no one came out. She went up to knock on the door and pressed the doorbell. But there was no response. No one answered. She then called the number from the order, but no one picked up. After waiting another 10 minutes, she gave up and drove back to the city. Some time had passed, and Joanne had already forgotten all about the strange incident. Until one night, she received another order, but this time, it was to drive someone from the city back to that same village. The passenger was a middle-aged man. Nothing special. He told her the destination and then sat quietly in the back seat. They didn't talk much along the way, but when they were almost there, the man suddenly asked, "After you drop me off, are you going to wait in the village for the next customer, or head back to the city?" Joanne thought he wanted to arrange a return ride, so she replied politely, "I'm not staying. I'll head back to the city." The man nodded slowly. His tone stayed calm, but his speech slowed down a bit. "Then remember, after you drop me off, keep driving straight out to the city. Don't stop the car." Joanne looked puzzled. "Even if someone waves me down?" "Don't stop," he said, still looking forward, his voice low and steady. "Don't pick anyone up. Don't even look. Just keep going." He didn't say anything else after that. Just sat quietly until he got out of the car. After dropping him off, Joanne started driving back toward the city. The village road at night was so dark she couldn't see her own hand in front of her. Everything was silent. The only sounds were the wind and her car engine. Before long, she saw someone wearing a red outfit standing by the roadside. The figure didn't move, arms hanging down, completely still. Joanne tried to see clearly if it was a man or a woman, but she couldn't tell. As her car got closer, the person gently raised a hand to wave. That one small wave sent chills down her spine. She immediately pressed the accelerator, speeding up and forcing herself not to look again. But after she passed the spot, she couldn't help glancing at the rearview mirror. The road was empty. The person in red had vanished. Not far ahead, she saw police doing a roadside stop. They were doing a routine night check. An officer waved at her to stop, so she pulled over and handed over her documents. After a few minutes of checking, everything was fine. Before letting her go, the officer asked, "Did you just drop someone off?" Joanne didn't know how to answer. She just nodded. The officer didn't ask anything else. She restarted the engine and drove on. Halfway through the drive, the air conditioner suddenly stopped working. The cool air, which had been blowing steadily, just stopped, completely silent, like something had blocked the vents. The inside of the car became stuffy. Sweat formed on her forehead, and her back grew damp. Then, the radio went silent. It had been playing a traffic report, but suddenly all sound disappeared. She stared at the radio screen. The numbers flickered once, then froze on a channel she didn't recognize. After that, nothing. No sound, no movement. The radio seemed completely frozen. The car became unnaturally quiet. No air, no music. Only the sound of her own breathing remained. Her heart grew more and more uneasy. She kept glancing at the rearview mirror, at the side windows. The whole way back, she didn't see a single other car. No headlights, no people, no sound. It felt like she was the only one left on that road. Back in the city, Joanne was still feeling uneasy. So she called up a few taxi driver friends to have a late-night meal. While they were eating, she told them about the strange things that happened in the village, seeing the person in red, the aircon stopping, and the radio going silent. But her friends all burst out laughing. "You saw a ghost? Come on. Maybe your car just had a loose wire. Taxis break down all the time, aircon failing, radio freezing. People see this stuff every day." "Yeah," another added. "It's just coincidence. You being all jumpy and superstitious? That's new. Since when do you believe in ghosts?" One more driver said, "What are you so afraid of? Seriously, being broke is scarier than ghosts. Look at us, still driving day and night. No money, no holidays. Seeing a ghost? That's nothing." Then one of her friends laughed and said, "You even ran into a ghost? Then maybe winning the lottery's easier. With that kind of luck, it'd be a waste not to buy a ticket." Everyone burst into laughter. Joanne wanted to reply, but just then, she glanced down at her phone and saw a notification. The next week's lottery was a super jackpot, with a prize over $10 million. She thought quietly to herself, if I really could run into a ghost. Could it be? I should give the lottery a try. A few days later, she had a day off and was walking past a lottery shop. Remembering her friend's joke, she decided to buy a few tickets. She didn't expect anything. It was just for fun. But when the results came out, she had actually won $20,000. It wasn't a huge prize, but enough to cover 2 months' rent. She couldn't believe it. She thought maybe it was just luck. A few days later, another draw. She bought a ticket again and won again. This time, it was $50,000. Joanne started to feel something strange. She had never been a lucky person. She always lost money on stocks, never won anything in the lottery. And now, 2 wins in a row. That had never happened before. She thought to herself, could it be my luck really changed after that night? The more she thought about it, the more curious she got. So she decided to test her luck again, not with lottery tickets, but by going straight to the casino in Macau. And incredibly, she played 10 rounds in a row and won every single one. Not because of any strategy or skill, just random bets. And every time the result landed in her favor. She couldn't really explain the good luck she had recently. She just thought maybe it was finally her lucky time. So she kept working as usual, picking up passengers. Until one night, she picked up a male passenger. The man got into the car and told her the destination. He didn't say anything else. He was wearing a full traditional Chinese outfit, with a few strange-looking items hanging on him. They didn't look like normal jewelry, more like spiritual objects or talismans. Joanne thought maybe he worked in religion or sold charms, so she didn't think too much about it. While driving, just as they were almost at the destination, the man suddenly spoke. "Miss, you driving a taxi alone, it's not common in Hong Kong. I don't mean to offend you, but have you ever thought about putting something spiritual in your car, like a Buddha amulet or protective charms?" Joanne smiled casually and replied, "I'm okay, but I don't believe in those things." The man didn't react much and said nothing for a while, but just before getting out of the car, he added quietly, "Actually, I didn't want to say anything at first, but if I don't say it, I'll feel guilty. I'm not trying to make you superstitious, but do you know there's a woman in red sitting next to you right now? She's been there since you picked me up. It looks like she's been following you for a while. Have you felt anything different about yourself recently?" Joanne froze for a moment and didn't say anything. The man kept his eyes on the road and continued, slowly and calmly, "She might not want to hurt you directly. That's probably why nothing serious has happened yet. But I can feel something heavy from her, a strong resentment. She's not following you because she likes you, and she's not here to protect you. Things not happening yet doesn't mean they won't happen. These spirits don't cling to someone for no reason. Maybe she hasn't taken anything from you for now, but one day she will." His tone wasn't scary, but there was a kind of pressure behind his words. It didn't sound like just a reminder. It sounded like a warning. Joanne felt a chill in her chest. She didn't respond right away. Seeing she was frozen, the man added, "How about this? I can try chanting a prayer for you. Maybe I can help send her away. I can't promise anything, but I'll do my best." She nodded silently, and the man started chanting quietly in his seat. His voice wasn't loud, but the rhythm was steady, and there were almost no pauses between phrases. Joanne sat still in the driver's seat, eyes looking forward. But strangely, after just a few lines, she began to feel a pressure building in her forehead. Not a sharp pain, more like someone pressing a finger against her skin. It was a strange, tight feeling she couldn't explain. The chanting sounded like it was hitting her ears, but also echoing inside her head. Normally, those words wouldn't feel like anything, but now, every sound seemed to carry weight. She couldn't tell what was wrong, just that she couldn't focus. The chanting went on for a few minutes. It wasn't long, but it felt like forever. Finally, the man stopped, let out a small breath. "I've done what I could. She's no longer in front of me right now. But what happens after that, I can't control." Joanne kept thinking about everything and started feeling more and more uneasy. That same night, she called a few taxi driver friends and said she wanted to meet for late-night supper. When they got to the restaurant, she told them the whole story, from the red figure, the strange male passenger, to the chanting and her ringing ears. After they finished eating, everyone was ready to head back to their cars. She walked a few steps, then suddenly stopped. She stared at her taxi in the distance. In the front passenger seat, she saw a woman wearing a red shirt, sitting very straight, expressionless. Joanne started shaking all over. Her voice cracked. "I see her." The other drivers looked over but saw nothing. "See who?" they asked. "The woman in red. She's sitting in the passenger seat of my taxi." They looked again, still nothing. The seat was completely empty. Everyone was half believing, half doubting, but seeing how scared she looked, No one forced her to get back in the car. One of the senior drivers said, "Don't drive tonight. Ask the company to change your car another day." The next morning, Joanne woke up early, after taking a shower and making breakfast. She sat in the living room, lost in thought. She held her phone, thinking about whether to call the taxi company to request a new car. The number was already dialed, but she couldn't bring herself to press the call button. In her heart, she asked herself, if there's really a spirit in the car helping me, then if I switch cars, does that mean I'm saying I don't want her? Will all the good luck disappear? But then she thought again, what if I keep driving and she stops helping me? What if she wants something back? What if the price hasn't come yet? She felt stuck in the middle, unsure which path was right. She had just gone through a terrifying experience, but then had days of sudden good fortune. Her heart was confused. Changing cars, that's what any normal person would do. But I've never been lucky in my whole life. Now that I finally am, should I really give it up? Joanne hesitated for a long time, but in the end, she made a very bold decision. She decided to keep driving that same car. That night, she sat alone in her taxi. No passengers, no sound. The only thing she could hear was the engine. She looked at the passenger seat and quietly said, "I know you're here, and I really thank you for helping me. I don't know what you want, but can you help me one more time? Help me win the lottery again. The first prize if possible." After she spoke, the car went completely silent. A few seconds later, she heard a soft, faint sound like the wind brushing past her ear. She couldn't tell if it was real or just her imagination, but it felt like someone was saying yes. Joanne didn't say anything else. She just gave a tiny nod and started the engine to get back to work. In the next few days, she really did win the lottery again. It wasn't the jackpot, but she got over $30,000. Although it wasn't a huge amount of money, it was still more than enough to surprise her. In her heart, Joanne started to believe those words she spoke that night, someone had heard them and even answered. After winning, Joanne went back to work as usual. She kept driving her taxi and picking up passengers. Deep down, she even thought, maybe I can try one more time. But about a week later, she started feeling tired all the time. She had no appetite, and even while sitting in the car, she felt dizzy and had stomach pain. At first, she thought it was just exhaustion, but after a few days, it got worse, so she went to see a doctor and did some tests. When the results came out, the doctor said her liver function was abnormal. He suspected early-stage liver cancer and told her to go for more detailed checks as soon as possible. He also warned her not to work night shifts anymore, and not to overwork herself. Joanne didn't say much, she just nodded quietly. 2 days later, she returned the taxi to the company. She didn't give many reasons. She only said, "My health isn't good enough for night shifts anymore." She never drove a taxi again. Where she went after that, how her health turned out, or whether she ever saw that woman in red again, no one knows. The story might end here, but the mystery never does. If you want more ghost stories and urban legends from across Asia, subscribe to Hong Kong Ghost Files. Every week, we dive deeper into the shadows. Like, share, and subscribe. Your support keeps the spirits talking.